David Monroe was the charming husband everyone admired, and Karen Monroe was the devoted wife no one ever questioned. But behind the closed doors of their perfect suburban home, a deadly secret was brewing, fueled by a jealous mistress named Emily Carter and a plan so twisted it would end in cold-blooded murder. David and Karen Monroe lived in a peaceful, tree-lined suburb just outside Burlington, Vermont. Their house, with its neatly trimmed hedges and white shutters, looked like something from a postcard. Neighbors described them as polite, quiet, and always willing to lend a hand. David was a successful real estate agent with a charm that made him popular among clients. Karen, a second-grade teacher, was loved by her students and respected by colleagues. Together, they projected the image of a steady, loving couple. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form, ones that nobody could see from the outside. Their friends and family. David and Karen had everything: good jobs, a stable home, and a 10-year marriage that seemed solid. They posted pictures of weekend getaways, dinner parties, and holiday celebrations, painting a picture of marital bliss. But the photos didn't tell the full story. In reality, David had become distant. He often came home late, claiming work emergencies or late meetings with clients. Karen noticed the shift, but she kept her suspicions to herself, hoping it was just a rough patch they would move past. She busied herself with lesson planning, volunteering, and trying to maintain their home like nothing had changed. David, however, was changing. What started as a casual flirtation with a younger woman had turned into a full-blown affair. He met Emily Carter during an open house he was hosting. She was in her late 20s, worked at a spa nearby, and had recently moved into the area. There was a spark between them, something David hadn't felt in years. The excitement of sneaking around was thrilling, and he quickly became addicted to the attention Emily gave him. At first, it was just drinks and secret meetings, but before long, David was spending nights at her small apartment under the pretense of overnight business trips. Karen wasn't blind. She noticed the smell of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, the unexplained credit card charges, and the way David avoided eye contact when she asked about his day. She began writing everything down in a private journal, detailing his behavior, tracking dates and patterns. Still, she hadn't confronted him. Whether out of fear, denial, or hope, Karen clung to the belief that the man she married would eventually come back to her. Meanwhile, David was becoming increasingly reckless. He stopped caring about covering his tracks. He made excuses less convincing and grew irritable at home. He saw Karen not as a wife, but as an obstacle. The more involved he became with Emily, the more he fantasized about starting over. Divorce crossed his mind, but he feared the financial and social fallout. His image meant everything to him. A scandal would ruin his career and reputation. Worse, Karen had access to all their finances and personal records. She could destroy him if she wanted to. Instead of walking away, David began to imagine a world where Karen simply didn't exist. The idea started small, a fleeting thought during a heated argument or while lying beside Emily. But the idea grew, fueled by Emily's own frustrations. She was tired of hiding. She wanted more. David told her it was complicated, that Karen wouldn't make it easy. But Emily didn't care about complications. She wanted results. The pressure mounted. David's thoughts turned darker. What had once been unthinkable began to feel like the only solution. He convinced himself that Karen was miserable and that ending her life would be a mercy. He began researching ways to make someone disappear without leaving a trace. It was a dangerous fantasy, but David was already too far down the path to turn back. Emily Carter was used to being overlooked. She had grown up moving from town to town, her mother chasing unstable jobs and toxic relationships. By the time she turned 28, Emily had learned how to mold herself into whatever people wanted her to be. Quiet and reserved at first glance, she could quickly become charming, seductive, or sympathetic when needed. Working as a part-time massage therapist in a local spa, she often met people on the edge of stress and vulnerability. It was in one of these chance moments that she met David Monroe. David was older, confident, and well-dressed. He stood out in the waiting room where Emily had been called to cover a last-minute client. Their conversation was casual at first, but something unspoken passed between them. A week later, he invited her to a real estate open house. She went, not because she needed a house, but because she was curious about him. That night, they ended up at a bar on the outskirts of town. By the end of the evening, their affair had begun. What started as an exciting secret quickly morphed into something more dangerous. David began visiting Emily several times a week. He brought wine, expensive gifts, and promises that made her feel like the center of his universe. Emily believed him when he said he was unhappy in his marriage, that Karen was cold and controlling, that he felt trapped. She imagined a future where she could wake up next to him every morning, where she could finally be someone's priority. But months passed, and nothing changed. David continued living with Karen, showing no signs of leaving her. He grew tense and distracted, and Emily noticed. The more she pushed for commitment, the more David pulled away. She grew jealous, obsessive. She started following Karen on social media, watching every photo, every comment, every smile. It made her sick. She wanted Karen out of the picture, not just emotionally, but physically. Emily began talking about Karen with bitterness. She referred to her as the problem, as if Karen's very existence was what was keeping her and David from being happy. David didn't disagree. In fact, he started echoing Emily's frustrations. He told her he couldn't afford a divorce, that Karen would ruin him, that she had too much power. It was in these shared moments of resentment that something sinister began to form between them. Emily, desperate to hold on to David, offered a chilling suggestion one night. What if she wasn't around anymore? David laughed it off at first, but the seed had been planted. The idea lingered. It was bold, unthinkable, but strangely liberating. For once, they both felt they had control over their own lives. They began speaking in half-truths and vague suggestions, testing each other's boundaries. Slowly, those suggestions turned into plans. David, more cautious, wanted it to look like Karen had vanished. No signs of violence, no trail leading back to him. Emily, on the other hand, didn't care about subtlety. Her rage was emotional, raw, and she wanted Karen to suffer. The two clashed over how to do it, but one thing remained constant: they were both willing to see it through. They started watching true crime videos, reading articles, researching methods and mistakes others had made. David began keeping tools and supplies in his office under lock and key. Emily picked up burner phones and mapped out remote areas she thought could be useful. They met late at night, away from cameras, finalizing a plan that would change everything. Neither of them fully grasped the horror of what they were about to do. They weren't seasoned criminals or masterminds. They were just two broken people feeding off each other's desperation. And soon, the line between fantasy and reality would disappear. Forever.it was a Thursday morning when everything changed. Karen Monroe failed to show up for her job at the local elementary school. She hadn't called in sick, hadn't emailed, and her phone was going straight to voicemail. At first, her colleagues assumed she had come down with something unexpectedly. But by lunchtime, concern turned into alarm. Karen was known for her reliability. She had never missed a day without notice. Something was wrong. Her closest friend and coworker drove to the Monroe residence during her lunch break. The driveway was quiet. Karen's silver sedan was parked as usual. The curtains were drawn. She rang the bell several times, but no one answered. When she called David to ask where Karen was, he sounded confused. He claimed he thought she had already left for work when he got up. His voice was calm, maybe too calm. He said he would be home soon and thanked her for checking in. By evening, a missing person report had been filed. Police arrived at the home shortly after sunset. David greeted them with an expression of concern and confusion. He invited them in, explained that Karen had been acting strange lately, that maybe she needed space. He said they had an argument earlier in the week about finances, that she'd seemed distant for a while. He even suggested that perhaps she had left voluntarily to clear her head. The police took note of his demeanor. He wasn't frantic. He didn't ask many questions. He answered what they asked but offered little else. The officers examined the house and found no signs of forced entry or struggle. Karen's purse and keys were missing, but her phone, passport, and a half-packed bag of laundry were still in the bedroom. Her toothbrush was dry. Her favorite sweater hung untouched on the back of the chair. These weren't the signs of someone who had run away. David told the police he had been at work all day. He said he came home the night before around 10 p.m., and Karen was already asleep. That was the last time he saw her. But his alibi began to unravel quickly. Security footage from a neighbor's front porch camera showed Karen returning home around 7:15 p.m. the night before. She walked up the steps alone and entered the house. After that, she was never seen again. David's car was seen arriving nearly an hour later. No other footage showed her leaving. Days passed with no sign of Karen. Search teams combed nearby parks, rivers, and wooded areas. Flyers went up across town. Her friends organized candlelight vigils, and the local news began covering the case. Meanwhile, detectives started digging into David's background. That's when they discovered Emily Carter. The first clue came from David's phone records. Late-night calls to an unknown number, frequent texts with no context, and location pings in parts of town David had no reason to be. Investigators traced the number to Emily. They began surveillance, watching her apartment and logging her movements. She seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact, always looking over her shoulder. Then came the real break. A hiker in a remote area. A forest about 40 miles from Burlington found something strange buried under a pile of leaves and rocks. It was a duffel bag. Inside were blood-stained clothes, women's jewelry, and a wallet containing Karen Monroe's ID and credit cards. Police secured the area immediately. Forensic teams were called in. Not far from the bag, shallow ground had been disturbed. When they dug, they discovered human remains. Though decomposed, the victim's dental records confirmed it was Karen. Her skull showed signs of blunt force trauma, and markings around her neck suggested strangulation. The reality hit the town like a thunderclap. Karen Monroe hadn't run away. She had been murdered, and the answers were pointing to the person who had once promised to love her forever. The news of Karen Monroe's murder sent shockwaves through the community. A quiet schoolteacher, buried in a shallow grave in the woods. It was a scenario no one could comprehend. Candlelight vigils turned into memorials, and photos of her smiling face were placed beneath flickering flames outside the school where she once taught. The small town that once felt safe now pulsed with fear and curiosity. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted justice. Detectives focused their attention on David Monroe and the mysterious woman connected to him, Emily Carter. Investigators quietly obtained search warrants for David's office and vehicle. What they found only deepened suspicions. In the trunk of his car were small traces of soil and carpet fibers, fibers that matched the red rug found in his private office at the real estate agency. The same type of fibers were discovered on the tape used to seal the duffel bag buried in the woods. It was clear that Karen's body had been moved and handled with materials tied directly to David. They also found a list written in David's handwriting, folded and hidden in the back of a desk drawer. On it were bullet points labeled "Things to Do." Among them, clean garage, dispose of clothes, and check phone GPS. The list was vague enough to be argued as innocent, but the timing of when it had been written aligned with the night Karen disappeared. It was a red flag. Emily Carter was brought in for questioning. She denied any involvement, saying she hadn't seen David in days. But investigators had already pulled surveillance footage showing her at a gas station just hours after Karen was last seen. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and dark clothes, her hands visibly dirty. She bought cleaning wipes, gloves, and bottled water, items commonly used for cleaning up. Her cell phone records also betrayed her. Pings placed her near the wooded area where Karen's body had been found. The mounting pressure pushed Emily to the edge. After hours of questioning, her story began to crumble. What started as firm denial turned into tearful admissions. She told police that David had asked for her help, that he came to her late at night, shaking and pale, claiming that something had gone wrong. Emily said he told her he didn't mean to kill Karen, that she had found out about the affair and attacked him. He begged Emily to help him get rid of the body. According to Emily, she didn't kill Karen, but she did help move and bury the body. She claimed she drove David's car while he wrapped Karen in plastic and placed her in the trunk. Together, they drove into the forest and buried her in a shallow grave. Emily described the area in detail: the bend in the trail, the overgrown brush, the broken tree trunk. Every detail matched the real location. Her confession was chilling, but incomplete. David was arrested at his office the following morning. He maintained his innocence, saying Emily was unstable and obsessed with him. He claimed she had made up the entire story to frame him for something he didn't do. But the evidence told another story. Forensics linked both David and Emily to the burial site. Carpet fibers, text messages, surveillance footage, and Emily's confession painted a damning picture. What shocked investigators the most wasn't just the act of murder. It was the planning, the coldness, and the way the two suspects had returned to normal life as if nothing had happened. David continued working, showing houses, meeting clients, all while knowing his wife was buried in the woods. Emily went back to her job at the spa, massaging strangers while carrying the weight of a gruesome secret. The case against them was strong. But the most disturbing question remained. Was this truly David's plan from the beginning? Or had Emily done more than she confessed? The courtroom would soon become the stage for uncovering the final truths. The trial began 6 months after the arrests, drawing intense media attention from across the state. The courtroom was packed every day with reporters, townspeople, and grieving friends of Karen Monroe. The prosecution built their case piece by piece, laying out a timeline that showed not only opportunity, but motive and method. They revealed the secret relationship between David Monroe and Emily Carter, the financial stress David had been under, and the digital trail that led investigators from a missing persons report to a shallow grave in the woods. Prosecutors presented Karen's journal, discovered after her death, as evidence of growing suspicion. In it, she had documented David's odd behavior, unexplained absences, and her gut feeling that something was very wrong. Her final entry was dated just 2 days before her murder. In it, she wrote that she believed David was hiding something from her, possibly even cheating. Her words, simple but filled with dread, echoed in the courtroom like a warning unheeded. Emily Carter was the prosecution's key witness. Her testimony was lengthy, emotional, and at times contradictory. She admitted to helping dispose of Karen's body but placed all responsibility for the actual murder on David. She claimed she had been manipulated, lied to, and emotionally cornered. According to her, David came to her late that night, pale and shaking, saying it was done, that Karen had found out about them and tried to leave. Emily said David claimed he panicked, struck her with a glass trophy, and then strangled her. Emily testified that she never saw the actual killing but helped clean up the scene and bury the body because she loved David and feared the consequences of saying no. But the defense painted a different picture. They portrayed Emily as obsessive, unstable, and dangerous. David's lawyer argued that Emily had long harbored hatred for Karen and had grown resentful that David wouldn't leave his wife. They suggested that Emily acted alone, possibly in a fit of jealousy, and then pinned it on David out of revenge. When things didn't go her way, the defense pointed out inconsistencies in Emily's confession, including details she changed during different interviews. They tried to create enough doubt to weaken the case against David. However, forensic evidence spoke volumes. The carpet fibers matched David's office. The list of suspicious to-do items was in David's handwriting. Soil found on his shoes matched the area where Karen was buried. Surveillance footage placed both him and Emily in the vicinity of the gas station near the woods that night. His GPS showed a pause in movement at a remote location for over an hour, the same location where Karen's remains were found. After weeks of testimony and emotional statements from Karen's family, the jury deliberated for only 2 days. David Monroe was found guilty of first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Emily Carter was convicted of accessory to murder and received a 20-year sentence with eligibility for parole after 12. Her cooperation and testimony, despite its flaws, were considered in her sentencing. In the end, justice was served, but no one felt victorious. A beloved woman was gone, killed by the man she trusted most and betrayed by someone she never even knew existed. Her death shattered a community and left a permanent scar on those who had believed in the fairy tale image of her marriage. Karen's story became a grim reminder of how even the most perfect-looking lives can hide deadly secrets. Behind the smiles and photos were lies, jealousy, and a growing darkness no one saw coming. What started as an affair ended in murder, and the quiet town of Burlington would never forget it.